Hello folks and welcome to our game again with myself, Stapleton and Michael Verney, who's obviously top of the pops over there. What's going on, Michael? How are you?
Good, Shane, all good. Heard you had a harrowing experience on the freeze at the weekend, though. Let's get straight to it.
Yeah, so like the Coola Juniors, we were playing yesterday morning out in St. Kevin's. They actually played all their I don't know if they play all their hurling games at Temple Oak, Sing Street, but you know the way that's a football club. But that's where we were playing the match. I don't know if there's sort of like a formal agreement between the two teams. But anyway, yeah, just before the throw-in, you're on the. How would you feel about taking the freeze? Actually, like I was playing full forward, and you're like you'd kind of like. I think everyone would like to think that they'd be good on the freeze and that they could take them and all that, and maybe you'll have a right day at it. And the manager Dan Regan, he was saying to me, like if you miss one or two, are you okay? Stay going, because. There was a couple, the way with the minors, there was a few minors playing and a few of them are good on the freeze. But because of the 7-day rule now, none of them could play. So I ended up taking the freeze anyway. And even in the warm-up, they were going arseways, like they really weren't going where I thought they'd go. And, when you're tipping away before training or whatever, it's grand. And I wasn't even nervous of them, but it was just like, I don't normally take these. I'm not great at these. And of course, what happened in the match then? Every free ended up by the sideline. There was frees. There was 3 frees on the 21, more or less, at the sideline. Oh, Jesus. But it was actually missing the ones more closer and more centrally now that annoyed me. I'd say I got about a 50% rate. I think I scored 5 of them, but I definitely left at least 5 behind me as well.
Basically, what you're saying is they knew that they could foul in like weird areas of the pitch because the free taker was totally unreliable. I tell you something as well. It definitely gives you, an appreciation for, particularly at inter-county level, what lads do so routinely. Like we played a game against Kilmallock 2 weeks ago, Senior B. Like I mean to say, like it was in a monsoon, like probably one of the worst conditions I've ever played in. And you and I was barely able to hold me hurl. Like I'm barely able to strike the ball at the best times, but I wasn't able to strike it that night. And you're just struggling with your grip, you're struggling with everything. And you could go. Remember when Tip played Limerick in the monsoon? Was it COVID? I think it was. Was it COVID or the year after? And it's just like, Dermot Burns is still able to strike a free over from 100 yards. They're still able to do things so routinely despite being in horrendous conditions. It definitely gives you an appreciation of some lads will be like, oh, sure, he was only hitting frees or whatever. Or like Dermot Burns' achievements are nearly taken for granted despite the fact that he's putting frees over from 100 yards every angle of the pitch. It's only really when you're put in that position yourself you realise just how hard it is and how easy they make it look.
Yeah, I don't think they had any notion that the Coola free taker wasn't going to be up to much. I was actually being marked by Cathal Minogue. People might know him from Today FM. I think it was Dermot and Dave show that he was doing. Obviously, it's not Dermot and Dave anymore. But I was just explaining to him midway through the second half. I was like, I'm not nervous hitting him. I just know that, it's going to be erratic here. And I don't mind hitting the next one as well. I've just no idea if it's
when you're explaining to your marker about your, inefficiencies and frees, you're losing big time.
Yeah, we were getting hammered anyway. So, it didn't, you're still trying, doing your best or whatever. But the result was never in doubt at that stage. But that was a bit of crack. Come here, Evan Ferguson. What about that hat-trick he scored for Brighton over the weekend? And anytime I see him doing something unreal, which, he's regularly doing when he comes on the pitch for Brighton and hopefully for Ireland more and more as it goes on, you can't help but just think of David Clifford because, another star of, just upcoming Irish players or whatever in different codes, albeit. But you have to play this David Clifford goal from over the weekend that was on Clubber. Look at this, poor number 6 being sent hither and yon. And then, Clifford, the way he just passed it into the top corner, it's just not a bother to him at all.
It's funny.
Unfair. Yeah, with Ferguson, it's almost unfair how good these lads are.
Yeah, Ferguson was unbelievable at the weekend, and I think it's hard to believe he's only 18. And there was one really good nugget he gave after where he said that his dad, who was also a professional and was heavily involved in the FAI, actually stands back or always stood back when he was training and stuff like that and wasn't getting on to him and stuff like that, wasn't putting pressure on him. And it's probably a lesson to other parents. But just on Clifford there, the poor old number 6 reminded me of Niall O'Mara's goal in the 19 final when he got Conor Fogarty to look around or turn around is the exact same. Once you're not facing Clifford or once you're not facing your man, you're totally lost. And that's exactly what happened there. There was another couple of interesting bits in it as well. There's a fella from the opposition team who peels away to mark somebody else and track another run. And I'm kind of just thinking, like, David Clifford has the ball here, lads. You don't need to be tracking any other run. You just go to him. And there's one of the Foster lads as well makes a run. Runs about 70 yards to take the pass off Clifford. He never gets it. And again, fair play to him because the chances of him actually getting the ball are very, very slim. But isn't it great that Clubber and the likes are broadcasting these games and we get to see moments like that? Like they would have just disappeared into the ether before. Nobody would have ever heard about them. And the great thing about it is as well, we're getting to see them, and we got, you see it yesterday evening, not only hours after the game, but yet there's still 3,000 people going to a Kerry Intermediate Football Championship game. Like, it is unheard of what he's doing. It's totally unheard of. And he's the GA's biggest marketing tool at this very minute, and hopefully for the guts of the next decade, because of things like this, where he just makes excellence look so routine.
And like, he scored 1-7, so they booked their semi-final place, and they're going to be up against Austin Stacks, who not that long ago were, in a Munster final against, was it St. Finbarr's a couple of years ago as well. So what an achievement that would be to get to a final, having only just won the junior as well and junior All-Ireland. But I was just thinking, like, with Meath, imagine, like, Evan Ferguson's from Bettystown. So presumably he would have been lining out for Meath. Now, I think he signed with Brighton, or he went over to Brighton when he was 14. And signed with them at 16. They got special dispensation. But apparently there was some coach that was involved in underage with Ireland or whatever that ended up working with Brighton. And all the clubs wanted him. And he ended up going there because of that relationship that the dad had with Brighton or whatever. And look, it's working out brilliantly. And long may it continue. But imagine if you were Meath now and you had him, Conor Nash, and Cian McBride, who's just been released by Essendon. You'd have three fairly brilliant athletes to sort of bolster what you already have there. I'd say Colin O'Rourke must be like, little rueful looks when he sees this.
Whatever chance he has of getting Cian McBride home, there's some chance. Conor Glass, probably a bit more remote. Whatever chance he has of getting Ferguson, it's slim to none. But definitely three big talents, all right. And Ferguson is the sort of player, like, Ireland are just crying out for somebody like that, aren't they? They're crying out for somebody that can score as frequently as he does. Like, I think he's only the fourth player to score a hat-trick at 18 in the Premier League. Like, that just shows you, like, there's some talk, and I would have thought it was loose enough that he'd be the next, like, maybe £150 million player or something like that. But, like, when you're doing stuff like that at that age, Brighton's biggest job is probably going to be holding on to him, I'd say, over the next couple of years.
And who were the other three players that have scored hat-tricks at that age?
Yeah, I meant to check it. I would have said probably Wayne Rooney won.
Don't think so. I know he scored a hat-trick in his, wasn't it, debut for Man United in the Champions League against someone like Fenerbahce, something like that.
Michael Owen.
Who could forget? Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler, and who could forget Chris Barrett-Williams?
Charlton, no?
Nottingham Forest.
Nottingham Forest. I knew it was red. Sorry, I knew it was red, yeah.
You have the right colour jersey. Do you know what's coming up later this week? And this video from Murray Kinsella will really sort of ramp the pressure up in terms of, like, how much our stomachs can take. But the old Viking clap ahead of the World Cup. How much are you looking forward to the talk of terrorism over the next 3 or 4 weeks?
I'm not looking forward to the talk very much now, but I am looking forward to the World Cup, I have to say. And funnily enough, I actually think, look at the clap in the background, it's like it's in sync with my words. Yeah. I actually think the fact that they're on a horrible side of the draw and that they're going to get a bad quarterfinal draw should they get through, or a tough one, I actually don't think it's a bad thing. And I actually think expectations are dampened somewhat because of, the caliber of teams that we're going to face. But I actually think they'll do okay. There was a poll the other day, will they get to the beaten quarterfinalists, semi-finalists, runners-up or winners? And I think it'll be somewhere between semi-finalists and runners-up, being honest with you. I think they could come through. I don't think they'll ultimately win it, but even getting over the quarter-final would be a big hurdle, I suppose, that they've never achieved before. But I am looking forward to it, yeah. Not looking forward to any of the
rot.
Yeah, any of that around it, but I am looking forward to the games. And it starts fairly tasty with France and the All Blacks on Friday. So, it should be good. Yeah, listen, like, and it's a void. And somebody texted me the other day, like, they were listing off the sports that we had last weekend, and maybe not, the best sports in the world compared to what we would have had on All-Ireland final weekend traditionally. So at least there's something filling a bit of a void here over the next couple of weeks.
And like, if you go back to 4 years ago, I remember Stephen Ferris being on some TV channel or other, and he was previewing it, and he said if they come home with a semi-final place, they'll be coming home as heroes. And I was like, what? There's very few countries who play this sport. Go out and win the thing, and nothing else it should merit hero worship. And look, I don't know. I mean, you'll get nothing easy against Tonga. You'll get nothing easy against Romania.
No, I will say this. They won't get much easy against Tonga. They'll get easy enough against Romania, but they won't get that easy against Tonga.
They should.
They should, but...
I'm pretty sure Tonga haven't played a Tier 1 nation since the last World Cup. That's how much the ladder is pulled up after the Tier 1 teams.
That's how long the grass is in Tonga that they're waiting in.
Anyway, let's see. Plenty of comments coming in. Porter said Richie Hogan's best game was the 2014 All-Ireland drawn match. Kirsten that day, a true great in his prime. Let's see.
We'll chat more about Richie later.
Yeah.
I'd say we'll do a separate part on Richie. What a phenomenal career.
Yeah, and we've got Oisín Langan coming up to talk about GA in a couple of different counties, and David Connors of the Tuam Hurl is also going to be getting involved as well. And we have Oisín here now. Oisín, how are things?
I'm good. I hope my camera's not too off there, lads. I'm literally doing a holding job myself here. Yeah, better than any holding job I ever did in a full back line.
There's no such thing as a holding job in a full back line. It's pulling and dragging.
Literally a holding job.
You were around the grounds over the weekend, Oisín?
Yeah, 4 commentaries over the weekend, and enjoyed them all, even though 2 of them were incredibly one-sided on was it Saturday in Dublin. Kilmallock Crokes and Afina both getting very big wins. It's I think maybe more so on hurling than any other sport, a one-sided game is hard to enjoy, but you do get to see lads express themselves. And what you also get to see is the lads maybe who aren't on the winning teams, you get to see who's trying, who's working hard, who hasn't given up. And we really saw that from a couple of players across St. Bridget's and Fogs on Saturday in Dublin. They were up against it in both games. I thought Bridget's, because they weren't hammered in any of their games so far, I thought they'd give it a better rattle. But to be fair to them, if you're missing Andy Dunphy, McGurk, Paul Winters and Owen Dunn, you're going to miss them. Any club in Ireland, any county nearly team in Ireland would miss that standard of players. So that was Saturday. On Friday night it was St. Vincent's. Went to see them beat Plunkett's. They won it in the end. John Heatherton playing well. Dermot Connolly, you can see the kind of the magic that man has, and he's still getting better all the time at hurling again as it kind of comes back into him, because again, at that level, senior club level, you can't just kind of go away and come back. But Connolly is one of those players, even if he doesn't get a touch of the ball, you still have to watch him. He still kind of drags markers with him. He still does, he still needs to be kept an eye on. And if you take an opposition player out of the game, even if you don't touch the ball, that's a good job you're doing. Yeah. So I like the look of Vincent's, actually, I have to say. I think they're very much in the conversation this year. They've been building over the last couple of years, and of course they've got Pat Gilroy in charge, and there's only one reason Pat Gilroy manages the team. I think that's to win. And I don't know Pat personally, but I've seen his body of work, everyone has over the years, and he always improves teams. Then on Sunday, went down to Thomastown.
Just a word on Vincent's, Oisín. John Heatherton and his hands and his flicks, like the flick, like it's so instinctive. You have to love it. And I just was watching the highlights back with yourself and Joe Fortune. Like it's beautiful to watch, isn't it?
Oh, he's amazing. But the thing about Hedjo is, again, a guy I've never actually met, but I'm happy enough to call him by his nickname, like I'm his best friend. But he's a big man, right? So that is an advantage, and you'd always rather a good big fella than a good small fella. But he has the skills as well, and it's not just about sticking the paw up and grabbing it and turning and smashing it home. He looks around him. He can go back out the field and distribute. We saw in that moment when the ball kind of came flying at him, maybe waist high, and he flicked it off his hurley, just a beautiful wristy strike. And he knew that Ryan McBride was running off his shoulder. Now, I'll say this, and I say it every time. It's spelt Reen, but he himself says Ryan McBride. And McBride ran into it and put it over the crossbar. And one of the reasons I think St. Vincent's will be in the conversation is because they have the McBrides back. They weren't there earlier in the competition, and they're magic hurlers. And when you've got a pivot point like Heatherton, who they didn't overly rely on Friday night, you can do damage. If you've got a guy who can make the ball stick and you fellas buzzing around him, including Dermot Connolly, then you can that's a big advantage. That's a big plus. But look, the riskiness of that move was absolutely amazing. And even Joe Fortune, I let kind of Joe Fortune talk over it, because the pictures spoke for themselves, but Fortune just said straight away, that'll go in your highlights reel, And then McBride, and by the way, and like McBride's point would be good enough even without that build-up, but that just made it, the fact that it was such a beautiful flick and beautiful catch. And like, some guys, you know it yourself, the higher you go, the more you have to do while you're moving. You don't need me to tell you that, having played inter-county, but you'll see it sometimes. Guys will stop. They need to take a second to kind of plant their feet or get a shot away. And sometimes that happens at the top level as well, if you get a bit of time, a bit of space, and a ball is worked to a shooter. But McBride kind of took it on the run without breaking stride and got the shot away without breaking stride, despite the fact that he was surrounded. Just everything about that point was just absolutely chef's kiss. Just beautiful. If I could, I'd hang it in the loo.
much like David Burke's point from the reverse hand pass from Joe Canning, it had to go over the bar. So fair play to Ryan McBride. He scored it anyway, because a flick is great, but you need to have the end product with it as well. You mentioned Fogs as well. They shipped a big defeat to Nafina. No sign of Liam Rush yet, Oisin, by all accounts, is there?
For Nafina, no. But they have been able to cover it at the moment. Like, you've Shane Barrett, who can go into the back if you want as well. You've Peter Feeney, who's a big man around midfield again, a lot of height there as well. But they're not missing him yet. Whether he will be back or not now, Michael, the honest answer is I don't know. Like any club and any team would miss him. But look, Nafina look to be on their way to the knockout stages. And the way it works in Dublin, I actually really like the Dublin format, I have to say. It's 2 groups of 5. And the top 2 go to the semi-finals. The top 1 in each group. The winners of each group go to the semis. The second and third place go to the quarterfinals, and the bottom 2 go into the relegation playoffs. And if you lose your relegation playoff, you're gone, because 2 come up and 2 come down. Now, the one thing I would say about the Dublin Senior Hurling Championship is it's probably still a little team heavy. I think you could probably go 2 groups of 4. Now, would it spoil it to only have 8 teams in it? I don't know, but I think the gap is just, you could see it in the games this weekend as it gets more serious and teams get their players back, and that the good teams kind of find their form a bit as we head towards the knockout stages and need to get going. The gap is just widening that bit.
Yeah, and just Lucan kept their 100% record as well. They had a 319 to 120 win over Whitehall, and obviously Crokes had that big win over Bridget's as well. Like, Crokes were very close, obviously, to Ballyhale in the Leinster final last year. There's no signs that, and you're obviously you play a bit with Crokes yourself. There's no sign that they've slowed down at all or that they've regressed at all. If anything, the graph still looks to be on the way up.
Well, I've now been moved to social hurling, which is a nice way of saying we like you, but you're too old for even junior F. I'll tell you one about my forced retirement recently. The junior E's were stuck, right? And the message went around, and I sent the junior E manager a message. I said, listen, if you're badly stuck and the difference is that if I don't go and you can't field and you get thrown out or you lose the game, then I'll show up and I'll stand on the pitch. I'll wear the jersey with jeans if I have to, but I'll stand on the pitch. I'll help you out. And the message I got back was, I know we have 16, you're all right. So
I know of a team, Oisin, one time that they started with 15. But one lad was so bad that I think they started the second half with 14. They took him off at half time. He was not much of a hindrance, but I'm sure you weren't that man.
Well, I didn't go in the end because they actually got up to 18, and I got the feeling that they didn't need me. The junior S, the team I would be part of, played at the weekend again because of work. I couldn't get there, and also I'm useless. I wouldn't have got a game, so it wouldn't have mattered the difference. I think they were beaten by Thomas Davis, so hard luck to the lads. But yeah, look, regards Crokes, sometimes you'll see a team and you'll say, God, can they do the 3 in a row with the same bunch of players? And while obviously a lot of the same players are there, some of them are quite young, some of them are relatively new, and Sean Purcell, he is a sight to behold. Now, do you judge him on a game in which they won so much? That, like, you don't get a full picture of him, but what you do get is you get to see his skills, his finishing ability, his work rate. And Saturday, he was buzzing around the place, wasn't afraid to take shots on. He was actually due to play for the Dublin under-20s this year, and he missed out because he broke a finger quite badly playing for his college. He's in Trinity College. Of course he is, he's a Kilmallock Crokes lad. But he broke his finger and he's back now. And He was really good. At the back, you've David Lucy, fullback, and he looks a fullback, Michael, and you'd say to hurling people sometimes, when a lad just looks a fullback, you can just see him. He just you can't imagine him wearing any. David Lucy to me,
nice bit of rawness as well.
Yeah. And look, it wasn't off the stamp he licked it. He's Stephen Lucy's nephew, and he looks the Lucy part. And I actually, because when I saw the name a couple of weeks ago, first thing I did was, wait a minute, Stephen Lucy was at the Sevens a couple of years ago. So I just texted Stephen, anything to you? He's like, yeah, he's my nephew. So yeah, he looks good. And you've Hines and Gibbons vying for the goalkeeper spot. That's like Rhea and Ramsdale at Arsenal. You've 2 number ones there. And then of course you've all the players that you know and love, Oisin O'Rourke, and Conor O'Reen. What a game he had, and just smashed that goal away. Talk about highlight reel. He'll top it with that goal. It'd be hard to see a better goal scored in Dublin or anywhere else this year. So they're looking good, they're looking strong, they're looking solid. I expected more out of St. Bridget's. They probably expected more out of themselves. But missing the 4 players I mentioned at the top there, every team is going to miss guys like that. And in fairness, Kieran O'Sullivan got a nice couple of points in the second half. He didn't give up. Cian O'Sullivan, he worked hard. He turned over ball, took shots on, kept going even when they were struggling. Jack O'Neill, who is a really just busy cornerback, but a skillful cornerback, he kept trying. So, Bridges were beaten well, but oddly enough, they can kind of take some positives out of it, and they want to do that because it's a relegation playoff for them now.
It's funny, you kind of half mentioned it earlier. Show me a lad that can score 10 points when they're winning by 15, and I'll raise you a lad that tries and scores 2 points when they've been bet by 15 or 20. You learn some amount about the character lads when a game is really going away from you and who can kind of stand up. So Cian O'Sullivan's obviously carried his Dublin county form into club action. You mentioned Oisin as well. You were down in Kilkenny. You were down to watch Ballyhale Shamrocks. They were beaten by Bennett's Bridge 224 to 217. I think they've a win, a draw, and 2 losses now. It won't worry them too much. But what were the main takeaways from the game? I believe they only finished with 13 as well, did they?
That's right. Owen Cody was sent off early enough in the second half, and then they lost. I don't remember offhand now.
Mullen was sent off, yeah?
Jesus, how could I not remember Adrian Mullen? It was so late. It was one of those ones now, Michael. It was so late, it kind of didn't make a difference. And as well as that, when I was on commentary for Casey Lower, I said, well, it's a second yellow, as was Owens, by the way, so they won't be suspended.
Yeah.
But Bennett's Bridge with Liam Blanchfield back, they've strong ball winners. They went direct. They load Adrian Ronan was on commentary with me, and he's straight away. First thing he spotted was they've loaded that full forward line because Ballyhale Shamrocks without Joey Holden, and they've got young lads in there. Their full back line is, you won't say vulnerable, but you'd say it's not as strong as it has been, and they're younger lads. So maybe you have a go and see what happens. And they got change out of it. Now Ballyhale Shamrocks being Ballyhale Shamrocks worked hard, fought hard. Up until the sending off of Owen Cody, you would say we're in the game. But Bennett's Bridge were on top. But again, Ballyhale, Shamrocks being Shamrocks, you'd say they could go with a late run here, and Cody and Mullen could catch fire. The way it works in Kilkenny is you could just as easily find yourself in the relegation playoffs as you could the quarter-final. And you could win that first round, and that gets you out of relegation, it gets you into a quarter-final. So Shamrocks, they can still play their way out of this. But obviously, they would be looking for form. They would be looking for momentum. But look, let's not take anything away from Bennett's Bridge. They were immense. The Blanchfields, Kevin around the middle, Liam up top, David as well, of course, played really well. Such a strong guy. And you could see it in the All-Ireland final how much Kilkenny missed him. He's a big lad. He's skillful. He can use the ball well. It's exactly what you need to combat Limerick. And Kilkenny missed him big time. Clearing the goals is good. Jason clear out the field. They've got when I actually looked at their team yesterday, I said, wow, big lads, ball winners, shooters. Their shooting was immense yesterday. And
they've underachieved, Oisin. They've underachieved since getting to that county final a couple of years ago.
Big time.
They haven't been in around it. There's too much quality of what you named there to not be in semi-finals and finals regularly. And it's cutthroat and competitive, but still.
Yeah. And there was a big Bridge crowd there yesterday as well. So there's this huge support. And Dan Shanahan, of course, is on the line for them as well. He's part of their backroom team. And they looked more confident in their score-taking ability. And I looked to the sideline, I saw Dan, and I was looking out on the pitch and saw a guy shooting and taking on shots. And I was like, well, that's the Dan effect. Dan, by the way, who helped Lismore stay senior over the weekend. I met Dan. You know the way, lads, if you go to the gym, you have to tell everyone. Well, this is my way of doing it. I met Dan. I met Dan in the gym in Dungarvan, a moved gym in Dungarvan. I said Richard Hogan is saying Sean Morrissey very good. Yeah, I should have mentioned him as well. He was excellent yesterday. I met Dan in the gym in Dungarvan before Christmas. And like, we're practically different species. And obviously I was looking for the really big weights, whereas Dan was going for the smaller ones. But I said to him, I said, you don't seriously expect me or anyone else to believe you're retired, do you? He said, oh, I am. Yeah, no, I'm done. And I said, no, you're not. You'll be back. And sure enough, he was. And Lismore are glad he was, because they stayed up. But yeah, he's having a very positive.
He's in better shape, Oisín, now, and he's openly admit this, than he was when he won Hurler of the Year. Like, it's nuts.
Oh yeah, but again, this is one of the times I can tell you about the work he does, because I literally see it. Not regularly enough, because I'm not there as regularly as he is, but the work he puts in, and you can see the concentration in his face. He hasn't kind of lost that eye of the tiger, you know, that hunger to be fitter, stronger. And like, you look at him and you go, this guy was, I won't say a childhood hero, because there's only 4 years between Dan and I, but this lad has been a top hurler since like the mid 90s, and he still looks like he could do a job. Well, he can do a job, obviously, but he still looks like he could do a job in Inter-County, you know. But obviously a great hurling brain as well, and to soak up the knowledge that he did about his own fitness and his own strength and conditioning, and to adapt it, and to do what he's doing now, and to look the way he does. And they're not just beach muscles, by the way, as well, as you could see at the weekend. Like, he's genuinely hurling fit as well. But obviously, and I think maybe it's because he wore a baseball cap backwards, and he's one of the few people who can get away with that. Maybe because of that look, people don't give him the credit as a coach. And when he was in with Waterford, people thought it was all Derek. And of course, Derek is a manager, great hurling brain. But Dan was a real driver of that as well. And okay, Laois, it was tough last year, but I think, you know, anyone might have, I won't say struggle with that Laois team, but Laois, there's the obvious barriers and things that you come up against. But, you know, take that out of it, he's had an exceptional coaching career. And even with Laois, you can say they were desperately unlucky. So yeah, I'm not surprised Bennett's Bridge look well drilled, given the talent they have, both on the pitch and on the line.
Yeah, Oisín, so you've seen plenty of Kilkenny in recent weeks with KCLR. So Dixborough, they beat Bunlevat over the weekend by 4 points. And I asked you a few, I think it was even last week, in terms of who of the challengers could dethrone Ballyhale, who were looking for 5 in a row. And Dixborough haven't won it since, well, they were the last team to win it outside of them in 2017. You're fairly taken with how they're going.
Yeah, I like how they move the ball. They've got Donal O'Rourke involved. Donal has coached teams in Cork. He was involved with Waterford Camogie. They've got Jerry Fitzpatrick involved. He was involved with Waterford back in the day. He's a former Irish international basketball coach. Basketball infiltrating hurling as it is football now. But like they look, they're really good to watch. They've got goal getters. They've got Killian Buckley, who looks sprightly as ever, having got over his injuries and having had a good season with Kilkenny, and having had that hero moment in the Leinster final. And of course, they've got Mickey Walsh in charge, and Mickey knows the score in Kilkenny better than anyone. Has managed them before, has obviously managed Kilkenny at various age grades in the past. So no one knows the hurling scene in Kilkenny better than Mickey, with the exception maybe of, you know, the likes of Ronnie and guys I covered the games with, but Mark Doyle as well. But yeah, like I just like the look of them. Now again, Shane, I'm judging them off hearing the results and seeing them against Danesfort, and they won that game handily enough. But I like the look of your namesake as well, Shane Stapleton, actually at Dub, played for St. Pat's in Palmerstown. Oh. But again, a bit like Liam Rush, just a dogged ball winner, you know what I mean? Somehow always manages to get that ball into the hand, even if the odds are against them. So I like the look at Dixborough. I like how they're moving. And they're playing... I was going to say, they're not playing what you call the traditional Kilkenny game of going long into the forwards and winning the ball. Like Bennett's Bridge would have done a good bit of that direct stuff yesterday, because they have the personnel to do it. Now, they worked it when they needed to as well, and they took on long-range shots and by and large were successful. But Dixborough are really kind of playing that short game and moving it through the lines and playing at speed. And from what I've seen and from what I've heard, it's working so far anyway. Okay, well,
Oisín, we know you have to go to the airport. You're the good Samaritan. You're going to go and collect someone there, so we'll let you go. But appreciate you joining us.
No bother, lads.
Cheers, Oisín.
Good luck.
Okay, so that was Oisin Langan, who of course does commentary for a variety of different outlets as well. So Michael, we might as well use this. Well, we'll go through the rest of the results from Kilkenny, I suppose, first. So round 4, Glenmore, they lost to Graigue-Ballycallan by 6 points.
That's a surprise now, Shane, because Glenmore were unbeaten coming into that. And Graigue-Ballycallan were struggling, so that's definitely a surprise. I don't know if they were getting circumstances there, but that's definitely a surprise. And you said James Stephens had a 24 points to 21 victory over Aaron's Own. I think Conor Fogarty was up centre forward. It's his first game since the All-Ireland final because he broke a rib in that. O'Loughlin's, who I like a lot this year and are tipping away nicely, they had a 29 points to 119 win over Clara in the other group. Dixborough beat Mullinavatt by 4, as we said, and Danesfort minus Richie Hogan, who has a hamstring injury, were beaten by Tullaroan. And I would have Tullaroan and O'Loughlin's as the two to maybe potentially take down Ballyhale if they're going to be taken down this year. They had a rookie full back line, and as Oisin says there, that Bennettsbridge totally stacked their full forward line and went to town by all accounts in there. But Bennettsbridge have done this before at this stage of the year, and they've been flying at this stage of the year and then not produced it come knockout time. Whereas Ballyhale on the flip side has done this several times and not performed in the group and then, obliterated teams in the knockout stages. So it'll be fascinating to see how it unfolds over the coming weeks and months.
I wonder with some of these clubs that, the likes of Conor Brown with James Stephens, is he due back from Australia? Has he come back? I'm not entirely sure there.
Don't know that. Luke Scanlon was very good for the Village, I believe. Niall Brazel was centre back. I think Cian Kenny was good as well, from what I'm hearing too. It's funny because a lot of the Bridge lads went away as well and obviously came back to play club. The timing of when you get lads back is huge, as we've said before.
Yeah, I mean, different lads have different priorities, and some lads go out to, I know, Australia or wherever, get a taste for it and like, you know what, I'm going to have a little bit more of this. But since we're talking Kilkenny, we might use it as an excuse to reflect on Richie Hogan's career, because he's obviously announced his retirement there in the last couple of days. But there was that period for a number of years where I suppose once he established himself as a starter on the Kilkenny team, there was a couple of years when he was in and out of the starting team because the competition was so fierce. But we'd seen a couple of snippets, maybe the league final in 2009, he scored maybe 110 or something. He was in and out of the team the next couple of years. But then there was the run of those 4 All-Stars. There was some huge games where he was just defining for Kilkenny. And I always remember the game against Waterford in, was it 2015, when he wasn't supposed to play. I think his back had kept him out, but he managed to, even on the Friday, he was due not to play, but he still ended up having a brilliant performance, scored something like 5 from play maybe. There was the other time then when he tried different socks for Croke Park, and he ended up putting up a photo of his feet just in absolute bits after it. But even 2016 when Tipperary won that All-Ireland final by a nice bit for a finish, I just remember how good he was for Kilkenny that day. Like you were saying to Oisin earlier, don't give me the lad who scores 10 points when you're winning by 15. Give me the lad who's, getting it done when you're under awful pressure. And that day against Tipperary, I thought that was a really excellent performance when Kilkenny were struggling.
Yeah, during that spell, he was nearly unmarkable. Remember, he came on at half time, I think, in the Leinster final and turned it around. I think he scored against 5
Galway,
points. Yeah, he was brilliant. I actually marked him on his debut in 2008, would you believe? He ran me around. Yeah, I actually did. I was holding him on the ground for most of the game, to be honest with you. But he went off after 60 minutes, and who came on to make his debut? TJ. So the two of them made their debut in the same game, both Mark and me. So if it's the only accolade I ever have in my career. And
what did they score between them?
Richie got a point and TJ got a point, which isn't bad. Yeah. Hey, listen. I'll never forget.
Hurlers of the year.
I'll never forget clearing a ball down the stand side in O'Moore Park, and as I was clearing it, TJ sprinted to the other side of the field, and the ball 5 or 6 seconds later ended up in his hand and over the bar. It was unbelievable.
That's a sickener, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolute sickener. Someone wasn't covering for me.
But or did you hit an unsympathetic ball down the field?
I'd say most balls were unsympathetic back in the day, to be honest. I would have had a fair kind of affinity with Richie down through the years. I marked him in a schools game under 16, and then I marked him in a minor game where he made an absolute clown out of me. He was staring down at me 30 yards out, and he threw the big dummy hand pass to the right, and I bought it hook, line and sinker, took the hot dog, ended up about 40 yards over here, as did our goalie, by the way. Went to the other side of the post and he just tapped the ball into the net. And I carried that one with me for a while, and we played them in the college's final, Leinster final the year after. And I was sick in the week leading into it, and needless to say, I was built up to play the game. I was built up. I had some, plenty of medicine in me, and he was after scoring 1-3, so I did it far too late. But he was soloing through, and the ball just came out of his hand, and like I ran through him, like it was bad tackle. I was on a yellow at this stage. Definitely should have got a red. And somehow, my mother heard a lot of abuse from the stands towards me that day. But he had actually ended up in hospital that day, and it was a woeful slap that he got. And then I ended up marking him on his debut, which was kind of mad as well. But you could always see it. It was well flagged from years out, the talent that he had and what he could do. And like his ability to strike in very, very confined spaces was unbelievable. Like some of the points that he's gotten, and particularly off his left. A lot of his best scores were off his left. If he found a yard anywhere around his left, he was just deadly.
Yeah, and that goal he scored against Galway a couple of years ago when he came in, robbed the keeper, flicked it up.
That's as good a goal as you will ever see, like, isn't it? Like, that is as good a goal as you'll ever see.
Your buddy from Burr, Andrew Sullivan, how many frees did you give away? So
max one, but I don't think any, actually. Funny, like, I'll be straight with you. A lot of the time, I just jumped on him and dragged him to the ground. That the rule was kind of brought in not long after that. If you pull someone to the ground, it's a yellow card. And I genuinely think it was on the back of that.
Yeah, well, the Kilkenny lads weren't adverse to it as well. Just ask Lara Corbett when he was being mounted by JJ Delaney, was it that?
Mounted is a good word, yeah.
Yeah, Verney, the glory years, pocketed Hogan and TJ, says River Power.
Just didn't pocket the money, I can tell you that.
36 and counting. The win and score in the league final in Thurles, sideline from TJ to Hogan and back was class. Yeah, there was that
coming
period.
of age. That was coming of age.
There was that
game.
period where the two boys, like that was 2014. The two boys started doing this thing for a while. Where
no, that was 09, Shane. That was 09, was it? Oh wait, no, sorry, no, you're right. I'm thinking, you're 14. You're right.
It happened a couple of times that day where the little chip into the hand, passed it back. Oh, it was lovely stuff. Now it was sickening to be on the wrong end of it because it was against Tipperary. The smell of Bull SH1 teammate coming out
check the records, check the match report. But I will say as well, that 09 league final that you talked about, Henry got sent off that day and Richie ended up on the freeze.
Yeah, wasn't it the yellow card where you had to be substituted?
That absolute nonsense of a rule. And Richie ended up at 110. But kind of like TJ as well, even though he scored that goal, and your brother Paddy won't thank me bringing it up in 11, where he was so close to making one of the greatest flicks of all time, and the ball ended up in the back of net. But Richie was a couple of years, really cementing his place. TJ was probably a couple of years longer. But I think there's always a sense of regret with Richie because, and Richie Power probably as well are the two big regrets that Richie Power obviously had to call time in his career probably 3 to 4 years early, but Richie Hogan's best years were taken away from him due to injury, and Kilkenny would potentially have another All-Ireland had that not happened. But even his career, he could have 2 to 3 more All-Stars. I know that you could say that doesn't really matter, but imagine how much longer even the highlight reel would have been if he hadn't been scuppered so badly. And his perseverance in recent years, I honestly don't know how he did it. I've been injured, as you have at different stages. I've probably had more long-term injuries than you. Like, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And it's so hard to keep your shoulder to wheel and keep going and going and going. And I was listening to an interview with him on Saturday. He was literally saying he always believed, and it was always a case if he get himself fit for that couple of weeks, he always felt the ability was there. But it's just like you were hanging on for scraps the last couple of years. And fair play to him for doing it, because it was a very, very thankless thing that he did. But it's obviously love of the game and a love of Kilkenny kept him going.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you'd keep that going. Then again, I suppose when you're just completely addicted to a sport in the game and it's a drug field or whatever,
yeah,
how do you walk away from it either with that knowledge that like he said, maybe if I could just get myself right, I could do something here.
Yeah.
And at times he did, even despite the injuries. I saw John Fogarty, journalist, he had said that during that period, I'm not sure the exact year,
14 to 16, I think he said.
14-16, that he was the best country hurler in the country. And now I'd reply to him saying, look, obviously he's unbelievable hurler and all that kind of stuff, but I did throw in, and people will say this is textbook me, but like Seamus Callanan scored 16 championship goals during that period, or was it 19, and was hurler of the year nominee 3 times and probably should have won it at least once in there. So
yeah.
I
He was unbelievable. Yeah, Richie was actually not to say he wasn't quiet in 15. TJ was quiet in 15. Those 3 years were unbelievable for Richie as well. I'd say it's 6 of one and a half dozen of another between the two of them. But to be nominated for Hurler of the Year like Callan was in those 3 years is outstanding. Just one thing, and it wasn't really said, but I think the fact that Richie didn't mention Brian Cody in his statement was revealing, I would say, to say the least. But we've David Connors from the Tuam Herald with us. David, how are you?
Good, lads, and yourselves?
Richie Hogan caused you a fair bit of hardship down through the years.
Oh, stop. He and a long list of them. Jesus Christ.
David, there's only one place to start. And look, I mean, it's kind of the talk of the town in terms of GEA, and Johnny Glynn's certainly a good fella anytime I've chatted to him, but this incident from the Ardra and Sarsfields game, it's definitely caused an awful lot of conversation. And look, I'm sure it's not characteristic of the man, but it just doesn't look well, does it?
No, and like it's a red card, like, you know what I mean? No matter what way you look at it, I suppose it's just, as you said, it might not be characteristic of the man, but it's just a moment of madness. I suppose he's probably, I don't know if I still can't get confirmed whether he's commuting back from New York or what, and things probably weren't going their way, and maybe he was a bit frustrated, and like these are only excuses, like, because there's no reason like for that kind of behaviour all the same. I suppose in terms of like for the match officials, I was at the game, and initially, like, it's from our vantage point in Ballinasloe, I don't know if you've ever covered a game there, but it's quite hard to see. So it like even at half time, I thought it was just nothing really. It was just a bit of wrestling and a bit on the ground and a bit of the usual kind of crack that you get at club games. So when I looked at a bit of the video at half time and I saw how bad it actually was. Yeah, it's what I mean. Like there's no defending it really. Like I suppose no one know more than himself when he wakes up this morning. Like what he did, and there's plenty of people online probably referring to him as a scumbag and all this kind of thing. The usual thing you get. Like, but just moment of madness, Shane. I suppose just I wouldn't defend anyone in the situation, but maybe the match officials, like I couldn't really blame Conor Quinlan. Like he went to his line, both his linesmen, he went to his umpires. None of them, like, obviously saw exactly what happened. So, like, I'd always say, like, if the officials didn't see it, like, you can't send them off. Like, regardless of the marks there, I'd rather they err on the caution rather than make some crazy decision. So, from the referee, I see the referee was getting some bit of abuse as well, which I thought was a bit unfair because, like, there was a lengthy stoppage. I'd say he spent 2.5 minutes really going around to everyone trying to gather the necessary information and made his decision then. And I suppose it's the usual GA, cop out really in a way. It's like 2 yellows and, you kind of get on with it. But I don't know. I don't know, but to be honest with you, lads, I don't know will there be any further thing on it really. Like,
if he's dealt with it at the time, if he hadn't booked him at all, they could go back retrospectively. But I don't know if they can now. And just on your point there, David, like, in fairness, if the officials didn't see it, they didn't see it. Like, there's not really much they can do. But it was, the optics of it looked absolutely horrendous. Like, I don't know. We were in Liverpool one time in Pop World, and we were acting the maggot, and we got thrown out, and one of the boys got grabbed by the windpipe, and he was in bits. He was in bits for about 2 days. We probably deserved it, to be fair, but the area Johnny was in around is very dangerous to say the least. Like, and your man, the cornerback, looked like he was in bits after it as well. It was a definite red card. If the officials didn't see it, they didn't see it. But you would have to say it was uncharacteristic behaviour for Johnny Glynn. I've never seen him do anything like that in his whole career. And he's probably the fact that it was on TG Carter means that this is gone probably around the world. But it was definitely a red card, and it was a very, very unsavoury incident.
Yeah, I remember one time, like, he was in college with my brother, I think, but like I remember shaking his hands down at the launch or something once, and his hand was just absolutely colossal. And I wouldn't say I have little Trump hands now myself, but his were colossal beside mine. But I don't know, Dave, maybe you want to comment more on that, but also, like, Sarsfields were unbothered with Glynn just from general play. I mean, the ball going in, how does anyone really mark him? And, he did get a goal. I suppose he kind of helped bundle it over the line and what have you. But like a lot of people maybe from further afield would expect Sarsfields to sort of win this game, pulling up a little bit. But maybe you looked at it differently locally.
Yeah, probably. No, I would agree. Like, when the group was drawn, you would say Sarsfields would be favourites to top it, and you would imagine they would probably do so quite comfortably too. Like, as they met last year's semi-final, now they got a bit of a tonking from Thomas's in that semi-final. So I don't know if it's kind of ripped up the script. They're gone with a fairly young team this year. A lot of kind of stalwarts of them have kind of, particularly in attack, they're more used from the bench these days. Your Niall Morrissey's and Jeffrey Lawless and a few lads like this. So they're gone very young in attack. And I suppose, with Glynn, like, there's no, like, Kevin Hines was on him, like, and Kevin Hines is, wily at the best of times, like, just with his power and his hand, like. But I suppose the only thing with it is, like, you probably can be a small bit one-dimensional when you have him there in the, from an Durham point of view. And I suppose they'd Tanyan as well. They'd Liam Ford, they'd Jason Kennedy, they'd four absolute giants inside, like, so. Whereas when they actually when they were making a bit of a comeback, they were kind of coming a bit more through the lines and things like that. So maybe just a bit of variation. I suppose just on the, you just said it. I suppose, like, it is uncharacteristic from, I suppose, he's probably putting in a big effort this year to kind of get involved, and they, it was a big game for them in the sense that if they won, they topped the group. Things weren't going his way at the time, like he's like at inter-county level, like he's a real handful. Never mind for your average club player, like, as well at the same time. So, just on Sarsfields, I suppose, Shane, they're not really motoring as well this year, maybe as a couple of years ago, or even last year. Just looking on it, they laboured a bit like Ardrahan. I don't know if you saw the game, lads, but I think they butchered 3 or 4 goal chances, like a huge amount of chances that they could have really put them away. There was one chance, I think was it Donafahy was coming through and Glenn was over on his own, like pretty much inside the 21, and all he had to do was stick it if he saw the pass. Just one of them, yeah. So they're in a good position now, though. I like, even still, like, as bad as they've hurled up to this point, I suppose, like, they still have 2 wins on the board, and they're into the knockout stages all the same. And if Castleguard don't beat Crowell on Tuesday evening, they top the group as well. So it's a job done.
Just on Johnny Glynn, Dave, really quickly, what's the prospect of him potentially playing for Galway again, and how much of an asset would he be at this stage? Like, as you saw yesterday, he just offers, like, that's even different. Like, that's not really in the inter-county game anymore, bar maybe Aaron Gallan or a couple others. Like, he'd be some addition.
Oh, absolutely. And, like, just even if you went with a 2-man inside line of Whelan in himself, like, it just takes a bit of pressure off Whelan, because he has to win an awful lot of ball in there for Galway over the last couple of years. So yeah, he'd be a huge addition. Now, maybe physically he probably has a bit to go, like, you know what I mean? He doesn't look like the inter-county, massive bulging freaking muscles coming out of all sides at the minute, like, but he's some paw on him. Like, it's just, you could rain ball down on top of him. I suppose that with the thing before, when he did play, like, in 2019, we had become a bit one-dimensional, and he was like very much a kind of get out of jail free for, like, defenders and midfielders to just lump it long, which won't work against, like, it obviously won't work against Limerick, like, but other teams as well, like, that are very adept at dealing with that situation now. But absolutely, he'd be a huge addition. On the question, Michael, at the start, I suppose, I don't know. I really don't know. I suppose Henry Shefflin will definitely make contact and see what his situation is. I don't know if he's back in Ireland. I genuinely, it's impossible to get information on him. Like, we were told before the weekend that he mightn't feature. Then, of course, he talks, like, so he was missing the round before because he was at a wedding. There's even talk he might play a bit of football this year in the club, in the county scene, at the club scene as well. But that hasn't materialised either. So I'd say definitely there'll be communications to see can they make it work, because he would be an asset. He would be an asset for sure.
Yeah.
Just lastly, on Johnny Glynn, in 2017, when he came back to play that league final, they had to tell him to tone down because he was that big. Remember, he was massive when he came back. Yeah. Remember the spank tip in the league final in 2017, and then they obviously won the All Ireland. But he was huge. Like, he was just starting to commute at that stage. So he's obviously probably toned down a bit since then. But he will be some addition to get back. Yeah,
absolutely.
And David, then St. Thomas's beat Turlough and it was quite impressive the way they pulled it out towards the end. And Dara Burke hit some really fine points there. Did you expect, like, is it a case that Turlough have made their bust in the last couple of years? Didn't happen for them in the final a few years ago. Are Thomas's pulling away from them again, or is that a little unfair?
No, well, I'd say, like, just over looking at the whole championship, it's Thomas's, Loughrea, and there's a good distance to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, like, which like Turlough would be in the chasing pack. I suppose like Sean Loftus, he broke his shoulder just before championship. Like, and last year he was their main scoring forward. Like scoring like scores and play have been a real problem for them. Like over the last few years in crunch games. Like I think even at the weekend, like it was only 2 or 3 points their attack scored from play. I think Dahi Burke was their top scorer from play. I think he hit 1-1, like, and he burst forward to score the goal as well at the same time. Thomas's are just a bit ahead along with Loughrea. They're just a good bit ahead at the chase back. In saying that, like Thurlock Moore have shown they can beat them, on a one-off game at the same time. Like they demolished them last year. I think in the group stages it was double digits at least. So, but when knockouts roll around, Thomas's are genuinely. That's when as the ground actually gets soft, they seem to actually thrive in those conditions at times as well, despite all the hurdles they have. So yeah, it would be Thomas's probably would be a bit ahead, like alongside Loughrea, a bit ahead at the chasing back at the minute, and that includes Thurlock.
Yeah, and like Loughrea had that huge win over the weekend against Kilkenny, and again, I don't think anyone expected Kilkenny to win it before 22 to 13 points. Like Loughrea, have they moved on at all from last year? So they took St. Thomas's to a replay, and Thomas's are now looking for a 6 in a row. But like from what you've seen of Loughrea, and maybe you haven't seen that much of them so far, what are you seeing, and have they kicked on?
Yeah, I think they have. I think they've actually improved. I think last year's run has benefited them. They seem a lot more confident this year, even than the start of last year's championship. I suppose by the time they reached the county final last year, confidence was high. Like, and I suppose after losing a county final in those kind of circumstances, after a replay and being so close, and maybe a couple of decisions not going their way either, they could have very easily won that county final last year. But it doesn't see. It actually seems to have galvanized them a small bit, and they actually look stronger again. Like they've got to this point. Like the first game they racked up 426 against Mike Cullen, scored 422 the last day. They bet Capitagal was by 11 or 12 points, and Capitagal would be like perennial challengers. Like they just at their ease. Like they've lots of scoring threats. Like their attack is the powerful men in attack. You've like Mark McManus only came on like for his first appearance in the championship this year. He was their standout forward last year. He came on with 12 minutes to go against Kilkenny and clipped 3 points. Joe Mooney, worlds for Mayo, big unit as well, like a real handful. And they seem to it seems to be Joe Mooney and Darren Shaughnessy seems to be the 2 inside line this year, where it was McManus and Mooney last year. So they have evolved a bit. Like they're playing very well. Jamie Ryan is like creme de la creme, like of club player in Galway. Like he's it's on his day, like he's just unstoppable, just pace, and he's so much skill and quality as well. They're just a really solid outfit. Like I think they've like most of their team, if not all of their team, have hurled underage for Galway as well at the same time. And it was actually strange last year that between themselves and Thomas's, like they'd no starter for Galway by the time championship rolled around, with Conor Cooney and Finta Burks maybe drop off in form, and Johnny Cohen's retirement to David Burke out through injury. Like there was the 2 best teams in Galway had no one involved, which was very rare and very strange at the same time. But it's it's very interesting considering they're so far ahead, these 2, by the looks of things at the minute.
And actually, Clarenbridge is one of these teams that's been talked up an awful lot over the years. They beat Tommy Larkins over the weekend, even though Clarenbridge went down to 14 men. What have you seen from them this year?
There just seems to be something missing, and I can't really put it. It's very hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. Like they've no shortage of talent. But if anything, they're over reliant on Evan Island. Like they scored 20 points yesterday, he scored 16 of them. So there's 4 other players that chipped in with a point. I know Kennedy went to town the first day. He scored 3-3 in the first round against the neighbours, Oran Mary, and the 3 goals were made by Keane Salmon. But after that, those 2 boys have been largely on the periphery the last 2 games as well at the same time. So maybe it's just a bit more help in the scoring department for Evan Island. I suppose it'd be one thing. They look like on paper you'd think, Jesus, yeah, they should be challengers. There's no issues there. But then when it comes down to they laboured against very much a patched up Tommy Larkins outfit. Like Tommy Larkins didn't have Jason Flynn again yesterday. So arguably if Jason Flynn was there yesterday, Tommy Larkins could have beaten them and Clarenbridge would have been out. It was that much like Clarenbridge left them in the game for long spells, and I suppose maybe Tommy Larkins were just lacking that. Maybe Ronan Murphy only came back the last day, that was his first start as well yesterday, and he probably wasn't 100% either. So there's just something lacking. I suppose it's probably just need a bit more help for Evan Island up front, because like it was the same in last year's county semi-final. Like outside of him, the scores weren't coming freely. And these are player British attackers that have won a plethora of minor and under 20, under 21 titles in the county, and normally tearing it up, but it just doesn't seem to be happening for them at senior level at the minute.
Are there any players in particular that have impressed you that you think might find themselves on Henry Shefflin's radar?
I suppose, like from a Loughrea point of view, like I'd be very impressed with someone like, say, Shane Morgan, defender. He actually won, but like at the end of the Galway's run there with the minor others, he would 3 All-Ireland minor medals. But he seems to really develop. Really good player. I think you could see a good bit of him during the league. He was injured in last year's county final as well, which was another blow for Loughrea. Trying to think, maybe like you'd like to see someone again like Jimmy Ryan isn't a young fella, but he must be 27 or 28. But like you would like to see him get a good run now during the World Cup and the league. Other than that, really, there's no one. Like it seems to be the same kind of faces standing up again. The county lads are really leading it for their teams. There is, you wouldn't be overly, Concannon has been, for the teams that are going well, Concannon has been tearing it up for Clymer Daly. Maybe someone, like a Rory Burke or Patrick Burke would earn more Mary as well. They bolted this year and they kind of topped a difficult enough group at the same time. So they seem to be coming nicely, and they probably had the best collection of rookies as well this year. But overall, I'd say, to be honest, which is probably muchness. A lot of the similar players from last year, unless a few can really put their hands up during the league or something like that.
Dave, 2 questions. Is John Fleming still knocking around? He was played early rounds on Henry's first year, and it was well impressed when he was playing Fitzgibbon, and he was very good, but I saw nothing of him this year.
Yeah, he just seemed to I don't know, did he have to leave the panel or was he cut or whatever, maybe 2 years ago now, I think, at this point, and he hasn't featured since. So yeah, he's hurling with Mealy Gaircourt. They'd be intermediate, so I haven't seen a whole pile of him, to be honest with you, but you're right. He would definitely be an addition, you think, physically anyway, because that time when he was hurling Fitz, he was very close to what looked like a senior intercounty, and good hurler as well, and probably just another ball winner in attack at the same time. Like if someone like your Johnny Glynn wasn't available, like he could be a potential there. So he's around anyway, Shane. So I don't know. I'd imagine he'd probably be asked on, maybe on form, whether he wants to know, whether personal circumstances, or maybe he doesn't want to play. I can't say. But yeah, you'd like to see him get a bit of a run, all right.
And lastly, just on Galway as well, what was the mood like after the All-Ireland semi-final last year? What's the mood like going into Henry's third year? Is there a feeling that, improvement has been made, or where do you think they're at? Like, the lack of silverware over the 2 years is disappointing. I honestly, personally didn't think he'd stay on, particularly with the commute and everything. What's the general mood like?
Yeah, people seem to be content enough that he's staying. I suppose, results-wise, it's, I suppose, if you had even one Leinster title, you could point to something and say, but even the way, the manner that I suppose they lost it this year was it was cruel. But on reflection, coming out after the semi-final, was very disappointed with the show, and particularly, the way Limerick took over after about 25 minutes. But then when you look at the way, they actually blitzed Kilkenny in the final and things, I suppose, Limerick are up there, and the Jason Packer kind of budged together. There's probably about maybe 5-6 teams that probably could beat each other on any given day. The mood, people, supporters seem to like him. You know what I mean? You would want to see a bit of silverware all the same. Though, and I'd probably be along your boat as well, Michael. I was probably a bit surprised. Well, I thought that might have been it, but he obviously sees something there. And the thing is, it's, by the sounds of it, he's not just going to see out these 3 years. They're coming to an agreement with him to do a further 2 as well. So it's obviously they're trying to give him a bit of time to maybe build a team now at this point, because I imagine we will see quite a bit of change over the next 2-3 years in particular. Probably a lot of stalwarts that are even there since 2017 are probably likely to step away. Not that I'm retiring anyone or anything like that, but it just seems to me that team has probably reached its point now, and we do need a bit of change and probably fresh blood. And I suppose there's no shame in losing to Limerick, but you really want to be like Kilkenny of how many Leinster titles racked up over the last few years, and looking at the teams on paper, particularly in Galway, we wouldn't think we're that far away from them. You think we would have at least had one over that time frame, but that hasn't been the case. So I suppose I suppose the people are probably willing to wait and see. But the general support in Galway is positive, and I suppose there is probably, when you look around, there's probably a lack of other candidates out there as well at the same time. Who is going to get it? people that might have been pushing before this, maybe your Jeff Linskys or Brian Halloway's, I suppose the under-20 campaigns haven't been good for them either. Like, so the options maybe aren't there in that sense, and even from an outside point of view either.
How's Matty Kenny getting on with Tina Abbey Denairi?
Oh, they're flying us. Now they only drew at the weekend with Ballinderry, but like they look like they're like almost like destined to go back up this year. They're a tough group. They topped us. They hammered Ballinderry. They hammered Spiddle. Paul Killeen is back from London as well. So he'd be a huge boost. He was missing for them the last couple of years and when they went down. And like they're very good. They're probably right on the cusp there. Maybe they were lucky maybe to go down last year, and the relegation final against the Hasker was desperate day. Like a 30-yard free was the conditions were so bad. 30-yard free was impossible to point. Like so, he's assembled a fine backroom team. Liam Hodgins is with him. A few more there that are with him, and I believe all things are going well. Like they look like they're probably a cut above in intermediate at the minute, and they're firm favourites to win it out this year.
And then just ask you about Portumna. How've they been going, and how's Joe Canning playing?
Well, geez, they lost heavily at the weekend to Gort, and before that again, like they bet Thomas's, and Thomas's like to kind of cut loose on them for some reason. There seems to be no love lost there, because when Thomas's were on the up, Portumna were still there, and I suppose Portumna would have give a few couple of harsh, like not harsh enough, not to this extreme anyway, beaten St Thomas's, but they would have bet them in pivotal games and things like that, just when the upstarts were on their way up. I suppose they've had a huge amount of player turnover for whatever reason. Like I know Andy Smith had retired, but he played the relegation, or not. It wasn't really a relegation game at the weekend. They still have a round to spare, but against Gort he came back. But like they'd no Ronan O'Mara, he's kind of taken a step away. They've got a good few injuries well at the same time. In terms of Joe, he's going well. Like he gave the first half against Thomas's, they were well in it. I think they weren't down that much at half time, and he was causing plenty of problems for Finta Burke on the edge of the square, which is no mean feat. But then Thomas came out and they blew them away. Like it was 120 to 2 points in the second half. So that'll tell you, like 120 and a half against 120 in a game and win you a lot of games. Never mind, in a half. So it's just they're kind of maybe they're maybe just lacking they're in a transition, I suppose, Shane. Like last year was a bit of a renaissance season for them, and like there's a big gulf though between the senior B and senior A. When they made the step up there, it was a hard one. Like they were in a group with Thomas's and Turlock as well at the same time, and Gort seemed to be improving as well at the same time. So just a tough enough ask this year.
And then just to talk about the Galway football, how do you see that going this year? Like it's been won by a couple of different clubs in the last few years. There seems to be plenty of challengers, but who are the runners and riders?
Mike Cullen, firstly, anyway, the holders obviously, and they looking fine. Fettle, they've added a fella from your neck of the woods, Mike.
Johnny Maloney, top player,
top player. So I believe he's been very good since he's come in for them as well. Owen Gallagher's playing very well as well for them. Like they've like Sean Kelly hasn't even had to play a game yet. He was over in Boston for the summer. He was tagged the last day, but he didn't even do a warm up. So like there's just a huge strength and depth. Like it's nice there when you can kind of come through the groups and you don't even have to use the Galway captain. And like they've a lot of like Desi Keneally, like it's phenomenal at club level. Like Owen Gallagher is excellent as well. Like and just talk maybe this might be Owen Gallagher's last year with the club as well, because I believe he's working in Dublin now at this point. So whether that's a return to Antrim, I'm not sure. But yeah, they seem to be leading the way. Then there's probably chasing packed in of maybe like Corrafin, Montbellier, Mylaw, Salthill, Knocknacarra. I suppose Montbellier, Mylaw were kind of at a bit of a shock last year when they drew with Dunmore, who won intermediate last year. But Mike Daly came back a couple of rounds back, so if they could get him fit at all, and Patrick Kelly hasn't played really yet either this year. Like they've a great attack. Corrafin though, I suppose, like they have great defensively, but I suppose they're without Ian Burke now. Jason Leonard seems to be gone as well for the remainder of the year, so they're two key forwards. They're probably in a bit of transition as well at the same point. And Salthill looked like they were labouring at the start of the season, but they turned it around last day against Kilmallock, and Rob Finnerty was on fire in the second half. I think he scored 2-3. So they're perhaps unlucky last year in the county final not to win it as well. So it's those, like it's probably similar to the way the hurling is with Loughrea and Thomas is leading the way. It's probably those four with maybe Mike Cullen probably a bit ahead and then the other chasing back. But it'll be an exciting semi-final, quarter-final stage if a few of them teams are paired against each other.
One final question. It's been a while since the Galway team won an All-Ireland club title. Do you think it could happen this next season?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Like Thomas's maybe, I suppose, would be the most likely and they would have a point to prove, but just like kind of really hasn't happened for them since they kind of come out of Galway by and large. I suppose the Ballyhale lost there a couple of years ago, but TJ's late penalty was a bit of a killer. The injuries kind of caught up with them this year against Dunley. They were without James Regan, David Cherry, Shane Cooney, and Dara Burke got injured in the warm-up as well. Like, so it's, they don't have a huge depth. By the time the All-Ireland series comes round, they're generally, they've had a tough enough campaign. I suppose the replay this year against Loughrea didn't do them any favours as well. I don't know. I do
provincial championship.
Yeah, we're just gonna say it.
Yeah, well, that's it as well. I suppose. Like, but Galway's essentially provincial championship. Like, but it's we're happy to play the Mayos and Roscommons if they want. Like, but no, and all content aside, I suppose it's probably now or never really for them. Like, like the chances that the team's getting older. I suppose like there is a chance. Like I hear David Burke's recovery is going fairly well. Like they're off for a month now. He's back doing a bit of training by himself. But obviously the last stage of it where you do before contact or coming into contact is probably the big one. So like with an injury postponement with a weather postponement or something, which is always possible in Galway coming down the track, like you could see
or an appeal maybe.
An appeal just there to throw it in, like you could potentially see him. Like I would not be surprised. I believe like he said there's a chance he probably won't play this year. Like, but like Loughrea county final, like throw him on for 20 minutes. You know what I mean? 10 minutes or whatever. Like he'd be some boost to bring in. Like when they haven't a huge depth of options off the bench either, whereas Loughrea probably do. Like so it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see, but I don't know. I think maybe the chance is probably gone. Like, but. Like, I'm sure above anyone, Thomas is well capable of taking a clip out of there. And especially in Galway this year, like a lot of people have been topping up Loughrea as favourites and all this type of thing. Like Thomas are on for 6 in a row. Like, and it doesn't take much to rise them. I know as well as anyone. Like they're well capable of telling you when you've supposedly wrote them off. So I don't know. Maybe like depends. Who was it this year? They would have the Munster team this year. I think wouldn't it be in a semi-final if the Galway champions win? I think so. Like the Ulster last year and wasn't it Ballyhale before that. So yeah, that wouldn't be an easy game either. So like you'd probably be looking like a Ballygunner or someone like that coming through. So you'd have to win it the hard way. So maybe the chance is gone, but have to wait and see, I suppose.
David, you've been brilliant with your time. Thank you very much. And we'll be chatting to you again soon.
Take it easy.
Cheers, Dave.
Right, so always great to chat to David there from the Tuam Hurls. I suppose we've gone to the Waterford semi-finals from over the weekend. Ballygunner beat 4 Mile Water 123-115. And to be fair to 4 Mile Water, they made it a decent. I think it was like they missed a free to make it 1-8 apiece. So they made a decent old fist of it for a while. But Ballygunner then hit 6 points in a row and they just kind of cruised from there. And I saw Fintan O'Toole from the 42 tweeting, Ballygunner 1 game away from Waterford senior hurling 10 in a row. Average winning margin of 12 points this season, through to the club's 23rd senior final appearance in the last 25 years. It just feels like a foregone conclusion. I know we keep saying that, but it really does.
Yeah, it probably feels. We'll chat about the final maybe more on Thursday. I echo your sentiments there. Fair play to 4 Mile Water. They made it competitive. They made it tough for them. And Ballygunner got off to a good start. And I think Desi got a goal around the end of the first quarter. But they made it very, very competitive. In fairness to them. And in the other one was a bit of an epic. I think they were level 14 times. Rowan Moore and De La Salle and it's just a matter of when the final whistle is blown. It could have easily been, if it'd been blown 3 or 4 minutes later, Rowan Moore could have been up a point. That was just the way the game was. And De La Salle are through to the final. Kevin Moran is still going strong in the full forward line. He's in there with Tommy Douglas. Jack Fagan kind of plays around the middle of the field, but is under the puckouts a lot of the time as well. I know from chatting lads in down around De La Salle that they think if anybody's going to stop Ballygunner, it's them. And it's obviously, it was a cross-city rivalry with Roemore in the semi-final, and it's a cross-city rivalry with Ballygunner in the final as well. Just a word on Walsh Park too. It looked fantastic. Any videos or pictures I saw. So the next stage of the development looks to be fairly on point as well. But we'll chat maybe more about the potential or the final maybe on Thursday's show, as it's the only county final in town next weekend.
Yeah, we have to give Sean O'Brien in the goals for De La Salle plenty of credit too, because he made 3 brilliant saves there. Reuben O'Halloran, he scored 10 points, 8 of those were frees. On the Rowan side, Gavin O'Brien, he scored 9 points, 8 of those were from placed balls. The relegation playoff that was also mentioned earlier, I think, by Oisin Langan, Lismore 320, Dunhill 2-5. It was 3-15 to 1-1 at half time. So the game was never really in doubt there. The Premier Intermediate semi-finals, Ferrybank beat Shamrocks 123 to 120 after extra time. And
is there Shamrocks in every county?
There has to be, doesn't there?
There's definitely Shamrocks in Offaly. There's definitely one in Kilkenny. There's one in Waterford. There must be. Oh, you'd have to be different.
We like to be, but there possibly is. There, because there's so many clubs there. There could be. There's surely one in Cork. Cork have 1 million clubs, don't they?
Richard Hogan says De La Salle versus Roemore is not across city. Me and you were down in Roemore earlier on this year. It's definitely in the city, and De La Salle is definitely in the city too. Yeah, and
Ballygunner is kind of sort of half in, half out of the city. And like when we were doing that Roemore club fundraiser, the talk was that there's probably not enough clubs in there in a way, because like there's certain part of this, like you've got these 3 clubs that are kind of really close together, and then there's other parts of the city where there probably should be more clubs as well, and maybe they're not getting everything they could out of the potential playing base that's there. But the Ballygunner second team, they lost to Cappoquin in that other semi-final, so we're not going to see 2 Ballygunner teams up at senior level next year, which I suppose is a relief in some way for the county board. We've talked a little bit about the Limerick Championship from over the weekend, shall we?
Yeah, we definitely will. Yeah, there was a bit of controversy in the game that was played on Thursday night between Ahan and Patrickswell. So finished Patrickswell 2-16 to Ahan's 2-13. Patrickswell are 2 out of 3 now, but Johnny Murphy was refereeing. Obviously, was refereeing at county level. But I believe he had it that there was 3 points in it, that Patrickswell were up by 3 points, and I believe the scoreboard was even changed to reflect that. But that was not the case, I believe. And the day after, I subsequently heard that he, wrote the wrong or whatever, and realised that the score was different. And I think there was only a point in it at the time.
Yeah.
But that has kind of knock-on effects for Ahan, who I believe started dropping in balls because they were thought they were 3 points down with time up, whereas if they were a point down, like you're just working a score and trying to get level. So, that had serious ramifications for Ahan, even though from what I'm hearing and the highlights that I saw, Patrickswell probably were the better side, but that still doesn't make it right what happened. There was some lovely bits of skill throughout that game. Tom Morrissey got a lovely goal. Aaron Gallan got a deadly goal where there was a deft little Kevin O'Brien flick to Keane Lynch, who played Gallan through. Kind of reminded me a bit of Conor McDonald's famous Samba hurling flick that ended up with Cottle Dunbar, I think, finishing to the net maybe.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Against Offaly and Tullamore. But that was a beauty of a goal as well. It's great to see those clips going out as well. But as somebody said, Limerick don't have their own one, but Dublin have their own. Dublin GATV is like it's some going really putting games out free to air. Most of the rest of them are obviously behind a paywall. I was going to say Limerick do the same, but they don't. They're on Stream Sport or elsewhere.
Yeah, and I suppose with Dublin, because they've got that bigger market and probably bigger sponsors in it, gives them a better opportunity to do it, but they do a great job in it. But just back to that Ahan Patrickswell thing, the fact that it was back to a point when that late goal was scored by, I think it was Paddy Morrissey. It was definitely another Morrissey, and Tom had sent a high shot in that dropped a little bit short and was flicked to the net. But like Lockmore and Holy Cross, they had that situation not so long ago as well, where Holy Cross were dropping in ball late on when they actually could have put a 65 over the bar. So it's got to be very, very frustrating for Ahan, especially when you are querying it with the referee. Now, I'm sure Johnny Murphy didn't mean to get this right. And, afterwards, no doubt, I'm sure he's as upset as anyone that that's the way it went. But like for Ahan, who really needed points at this stage of the group, like Kilmallock are top with 3 wins from 3. Patrickswell have 4 points. Na Piarsaigh have 4 points. Ahan have 1, Doon have 1, and Kildimo, Pallaskenry, they're on 0. But if Ahan had to get it back, and, you know, if they had to draw it or win it, you know, and I mean, it does change the energy and flow of a game if you think
Totally.
that behind, you know, so that's a really, really tough one for them to swallow. I suppose just to talk about the other games in the group, at the start of the year, when you're looking at the kind of playing base of both Doon and Na Piarsaigh, you'd be thinking, right, there's a good chance for Doon. Will they finally end their quest for a Limerick county title? But the way Na Piarsaigh disposed of them here, 423 to 16 points, it was never in doubt. 4 first half goals. Adrian Breen got a couple of them. Conor Boylan, you know, he's an absolute machine. You talk about Johnny Glynn earlier on. He's not quite the same height, but you know, he's a high tower. He's
big unit, yeah, good paw. Yeah,
able to move as well. Ronan Lynch got the other goal also.
Ronan Lynch was up in the forwards again, actually.
Yeah.
Which
so
is,
like,
and he was dangerous, very dangerous. Just on Doon, Shane, I would have thought the same as you. I think Fergie O'Loughlin's over them, and there was talk that Davy was involved in the backroom team, his brother-in-law. I'm not sure whether that actually materialised. But losing Richie English before the All-Ireland final, like, he's their fullback, you know, brilliant player. I don't think Josh Ryan is back yet either from the injury that he suffered this time last year with the club that saw him miss all of the county football scene. I think they're missing the guts of 7 or 8 from last year's squad. Just from chatting a few people down there. They obviously had a brilliant result second day out against Patrickswell, but they were well beaten the first day, well beaten here, so they're behind the 8 ball now already.
Yeah, so Shane O'Neill is back with the Piarsaigh this year, obviously,
and Shane Dowland's back in the goals.
Yeah.
He put over a long range free as well from his own 45.
Yeah, and I believe they'd be buddies as well. But Shane O'Neill obviously had that run before, won the Club All-Ireland with them. Na Piarsaigh, they face Ahan on Thursday evening. Doon, they're going to be up against Kildimo, Pallaskenry. That's a must-win game for both teams. But the fact that there's midweek games in Limerick, there's midweek games in Dublin. Are there midweek games ever in Offaly?
No, Friday, and I don't even think there were Friday games this year. It was all Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, is it feasible in Offaly, or would you have a lot of players commuting up and down the country?
You'd have a good few, but you know, it's the same as I said it to you before about county games. As long as lads have the guts of 2 weeks' notice, I think they're well doable. It does buy a good bit of time. Limerick are playing games regularly on Thursdays. I know they do it in Dublin fairly regular too. Like, if you do play a game on Thursday, it does open up, like, for players anyway, like, it opens up the whole weekend for you, which is great. And you can actually go off for 2 or 3 days after. Whereas if you're playing at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening, like, everything revolves around it. You know what I mean? And that's just, like, that's it. I just think it makes more sense to play a few games, to spread out games a bit more. People get the chance to see more games, see more clubs. I just think it makes more sense. But again, has to be planned out pretty well in advance, and you have to give players a lot of notice.
Yeah, Kilmallock, they're on 3 wins from 3. They beat Kildimo, Pallaskenry, and it's 3 losses from 3 for KP, I'm going to call them here. So
Kevin Peterson, that's the English cricketer. That's what they call KP. Yeah,
and the Peanuts are KP Peanuts, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah.
Shane O'Brien, he hit 1-4 from play. Then in the other group, Ballybrown, they're top with 5 points. Monaleen on 4, Adair 3, Gary Splan 1, and South Liberties are on 0. So just the results from the weekend. Adair, they lost to Mungret. It was 270 to 123. Declan Hannon, he got a goal actually on his return from injury. Gary Spillane, 212. Monaleen, the All-Ireland Intermediate Champions, 321. Donnacha O'Donnell, he scored 2 goals. Dylan O'Shea had a couple for Gary Spillane. And then Barry Adams, he scored a hat-trick for Ballybrown. 521 to 217 over South Liberties, so it wasn't really up for debate at all.
No, just on Monaleen, I was very surprised that they fell as heavily as they did first time out. But I believe they had a couple of injuries coming back from the county season even, and they have everybody back on board now, and look like they're probably going to get into is it a preliminary quarterfinal or a proper quarterfinal? I'm not sure. But it looks like they're motoring fairly nicely. Marco Dwyer is back. O'Donnell is still flying it. Again, like, when you think of Limerick, he's someone who made a mark in the league. Don't know if did he see a minute of championship action? I don't think he did. Like, there's still plenty of new faces ready to jump in onto the Limerick scene that we're going to see a lot more next year. And even, like, I was watching the highlights of the Na Piarsaigh game, like, Adrian Breen is hurling as well as ever. Like, probably one of the best club forwards in the country, realistically, on his day. And don't think he's played with Limerick. Did he play in the COVID final against Waterford? I think he might have come on and got a point. And I don't think he's played a minute hardly since.
Yeah, is he based down in Cork? Was that something to do with it before that he had to step away because of where he's based?
Could be, yeah. Could be.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but there's part of me, something telling me that that's part of it anyway. The Cork Premier Senior Hurling Championship, I just saw the way it's panning out over the weekend. So guaranteed into the semi-final already is Middleton. They're the top seed. The quarterfinals now, we know who's going to face each other. Charleville are going to meet St. Finbarrs, Sarsfields against Blackrock, Douglas against Inmakilly, and Glen Rovers, surprisingly enough, I suppose, on the face of it, you'd think they'd be another team challenging. They're going to be in the relegation final against Kanturk. Now, Kanturk were beaten by St. Finbarrs over the weekend. Ben Cunningham scored 18 points, 16 of those from frees. Jack Cahalan scored 3, his brother Connor scored 2. Blackrock, then they lost by 23 points to 18 against Middleton. That's a fair sign from Middleton that they can win this game and secure top seed spot without Conor Lahan.
Savage, yeah. Like that was the one thing I said to you just when we were preparing for the show. Like to put up the score that they did without Conor Lahan is huge. And the great Cormac Beastings was on the frees. I think it was 8.7 frees. That's a great sign. And it also buys Lahan plenty of time to be back, raring to go, hopefully, for a semi-final. They're the only team that are straight through to the semi-final. As regarding the Bars, like, I did a piece there about, a month or 6 weeks ago, the amount of Cork lads that went over to the States. The Bars probably had more than anybody, I'd say. And it was just a matter of staying in the reckoning before, to buy time for all those to come back. They'll have another 2 weeks now. I still see them being very hard beaten. They have Charleville in a quarter final. They won at the weekend, minus Dara Fitzgibbon as well, which is equally.
What is it about teams winning without their stars?
Yeah, that was a serious win for them. So I think it was they beat Douglas 218 to 21 points. Douglas, who I still think are totally underachieving for the quality of player that they have. Now, they were through to a quarter final already, so maybe they prove me wrong from here on in. In the quarter final, they have Inmakilly, which is a tough one because Seamus Harnedy and all those boys are back from the States as well, and they're very strong again. So I probably have the Bars still favourites in Cork, and the Glen will be just hoping that they can save their bacon. Realistically, Kanturk came up 2 years ago, I think, after winning the Intermediate Club All Ireland, and they obviously performed well enough against the weekend at the Bars. That'll be a tight game. Just for tradition, it would be a huge one if the Glen went down. There'd be massive ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. Aaron's own drew with Father O'Neill's. That was 119 to 216 there. Notable scoring from Declan Dalton. He hit 110, 1-4. That was from play. Glen Rovers lost. That was to Bishopstown, 221 to 219. Newtown Shandram, they were beaten comprehensively enough by Sarsfields. That was 419 to 118 there. We've gone through Galway already. We've gone through plenty of them. Let's move to Offaly. What's the crack in Offaly? What was the standout results from the weekend?
Standout result was probably Ballinamere booking their first semi-final place in, I think, something like 110 years or something like that. They're straight through to the semi-final. They scored the last 7 in a row to beat the county champions Shinrone in Burr on Saturday evening. And from what I'm hearing, Ballinamere finished strong. Brian Dignan put over some very good scores in the second half, but Shinrone were very, 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 very wasteful by all accounts and had a semi-final place in their hands. The winner just basically went through to the semi-final, loser into the quarter-final. And Shinrone will be disappointed to have lost the winning position, basically. A lot of the Ballinamere lads played football the week before. They were beaten in a football quarter-final. Like, I don't know if that fitness is standing to them, but they finished the game really, really well. They're straight through to a semi-final. Most people would say that group is a bit weaker than the other. So Ballinamere are through on one side. Shinrone now play Burr in a quarter-final, and Coolderry, who played the best hurler of the year, to beat Belmount. Belmount are gone already, having been in lots of semi-finals in recent years, and they should have been in a county final last year. They were up a point or two. I think they were up 6 or 7 actually in Shinrone in the semi-final last year, and somehow managed to lose the game. But they're gone. And it's Coolderry and Rhinus in the quarter-final. Rhinus had a comprehensive win over Kinnity, who are in relegation. Kilcormac are through to the semi-finals from that group. So it finished Kilcormac 1, Rhinus 2, Borough 3. Kilcormack beat our lads yesterday. It was 7 apiece after 20 minutes. And then they hit 1-6 without response coming up to half-time. Conor Matton got the goal. I think he used to play a bit of football, but he was always fond of a boot, and I think he booted it to the net. We came back at them in the second half, but I think it was more to do with Kilcormack's wastefulness by all accounts, and just a bit of complacency, a bit kind of lackadaisical. Got it back to 3, and we had a goal chance to go level, but Kilcormack kind of just were able to steady the ship and get a couple of scores. Adam Screeney ended up with, I think, 8 6 frees. Burr's best player by a mile was Emmett Nolan, who's living in Dubai, but he was home for about 6 weeks, and then he flew back to Dubai. But he was flown home for this game, and he'd be, I think, flown back again for the quarter final and the semi final or the final if we're able to get that far. But Kilcormack look a step ahead at the moment, and that's only playing in third or fourth gear. But it's just, as I said it to you before, some team just needs to step up a gear, and they've a great chance of winning a county final. Kilcormack are going to dominate, but that's probably in 3 to 4 years. So there's not much between 3 or 4 teams there now. But I probably would still have something like this as regards pecking order. Probably Kilcormack 1, Rhinus 2, maybe Shinrone, Burr and Ballamere all around kind of similar standards.
The Monaghan final was on over the weekend. Adrian McGrath was asking, will St. Be covering the Monaghan County final? Does he know why I'm specifically asking him that? We do, of course. Niall Arthur, Clare man, he scored 1-6 to help Enniskeane to their first county title since 2016. He was sent off and missed the last quarter, but he got the only goal of the game as Enniskeane beat Castleblaney 111 to 13 points. Just he's been around the block. Did he play in Louth or for Louth not so long ago? He played with O'Toole's in Dublin as well.
I think it was earlier on this year that they played a round of the Monaghan Senior Hurling Championship so that he could be eligible to play for Monaghan, who won the Laurie Marr this year. The fact that they survived without him for the last 15 minutes was huge. I think another free taker stepped up and hit over 3 key points. Castleblaney were going for 7 in a row. So that's a massive win. I do shout out to Mike Lyons, who's of Banner origin, St. Rhinus man. He was playing wing back for Enniskeane yesterday. I saw a post up on Facebook there, and he's a happy man this morning.
Okay. The Antrim Championship, that's still going on in Antrim, obviously enough.
Is it Antrim? Yeah, the Glens.
Yeah. O'Donovan Ross is 626, Clooney Gales 216, Dunloy 26 points, St. John's of Belfast 21. The other group then, Ballycastle 221, St. Enda's 317, Ballycastle getting the win there. And Lochgiel 19 points, Cushendall 422, so they fairly pasted them there. So Dunloy there.
Neil McManus got 4 goals.
He did, 3 of them in the first half. Dunloy, they got top spots, so they're into the semi-finals, as are Cushendall as well. 4-9 for Neil McManus overall. And then the other quarterfinals then, so Ballycastle, they're going to face Rossa in 2 weeks' time, and Lochgiel will face St. John's. But that's a hefty scoreline that Cushendall have put up against Lochgiel, and they would have been massive rivals over the years, and no doubt they still are. That's going to hurt. Like a couple of the goals for Neil McManus, there was a 21-yard free and a penalty in the first half, but his other goals are pretty tasty as well. Still getting it done.
Yeah, Lochgiel are another one of the Shamrocks, obviously, as well. I'd love to. I think Newry Shamrocks too. As Andrew Sullivan mentioned in the comments, there are no Shamrocks in Tipperary, but a heap of Rovers, which there is. I'm going to actually have to check how many counties have a Shamrocks in them, because I'd say more than half do. Dunloy obviously would still be favourites up in Antrim, and they're reigning Ulster champions, and were obviously beaten narrowly enough in the All-Ireland final last year. But I'd say Cushendall will be running them close again.
Yeah, Richard Hogan says, setting for Cushendall v Dunloy county final in Antrim. And by the way, did you notice that Marty Clark made a comeback for Enrique over the weekend? Everyone would have, of course, remembered him when he went down to the AFL and then came back and played in an All-Ireland final for Down. They were in the intermediate, I'm not sure what stage it was, for Enrique against St. John's. And he played the final 10 minutes there. And I think was it Addison's disease? Was that the thing that he had in the past? Yeah. So he hasn't played at all since 2017, I think. So fair play to him for making a comeback. And, I believe some of the old silken touches were on display. So fair play to him as well.
He was some he was a proper like quarterback playmaker back in the day, wasn't he? Like he just threaded passes beautifully. Like they were very close to winning All Ireland in 2010. Like very, very close. I think they were only beating a point. But great to see him back in action. There was plenty of action in Mayo over the weekend as well. I think it was round 2 scores. So just fly through them really quickly. Briefly, bounced back from defeat in the opening round. They had a 1-12, 2-7 win over Ballina. Stephen Knights and Mayo Gales finished level at 110. That's all in Group 1. Westport, reigning county champions, had a 14 points to 1-7 win over Balladreen. Charlestown had a 2-13 to 15 points win over Clare Morris. Ballintubber kept their winning ways going in Group 3. They had a 13 points to 10 win over Belmullet. Gary Moore beat the Neil. The Neil are already struggling again there. The Nail, yeah. You just are looking for an excuse to say hammer the Nail.
Yeah.
Group 4, Knockmore, who are looking to obviously get their hands back on the county title again. They were going for 3 in a row last year before being beaten. They finished 2-15 to Ballyhollis with 5 points. And Castlebar edged out Ahamore 1-8 to 1-7.
Okay, as well. I'm just double checking here who won between Mayo Bridge and Kilcoo. Yeah, Kilcoo. Eventually won that game. It was 110-5. I noted that Carroll Kane wasn't exactly glowing in his praise of the fare that he saw in the first half or so. Anyway, so there's plenty of football going on in the country at the moment. So we'll be targeted in more and more of the big stuff as it comes along. Anything else you want to touch on? Oh, go to the week, of course.
Oh, well, you've definitely caught me on the spot anyway now. I'm just thinking of
Neil McManus.
Neil McManus for you. I'm going to go with Adrian Breen for an Apirshik.
Yeah, not bad.
From a football side, Jesus, it's hard. Marty Clark for coming back. I was going to give it to Clifford, but Marty Clark for making a comeback 6 years later. Fair play to whoever coaxed him out of retirement as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's it from the show this Monday. We'll be back again later in the week. Loads more to talk about, and we'll see you all then. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shano.